to talk about the organisational review and introduce the organisational review of the BMC. The genesis of this work, just to get a sort of time frame in mind, this was set up within the last sort of 18 months or so, when it became apparent to both the National Council and Exec of the BMC that things weren't quite right in the way the whole BMC was actually structured and put together. And in February this year, the National Council agreed, yeah, we need to do something, we need to have a proper sort of review and a study. This kicked off in April, and it was put on the table, and an independent team was actually drawn to deliver on this. Independent, I think, is really important. The current management in terms of the Exec and the National Council have not been involved with this, and indeed had no idea what the outcome would be until earlier this week. So we're a little bit sort of sitting in the same position that you are currently. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, what I'm going to do now is hand over to Ray, the team leader of the organisational review, and really he can tell you what he's been up to for the last couple of months. Ray.
Thanks, Nick. For me, coming to this building this morning was a bit of a trip down memory lane, because over a number of years I used to travel from my chambers in Manchester to appear as a barrister in the court which is in the next room in this very building. I appeared as a prosecuting counsel and as a defence counsel. And I think it's quite important that I just tell you one particular piece of detail which may be relevant to today's proceedings. The judge who sat here was called Tony Edmondson. He was unbelievably lazy, and he was a very keen fisherman. And if the fish were rising, his lists would finish early, and he would disappear. This court building, I think throughout the 1970s and 1980s, only used to sit one day a month. And when the Lord Chancellor's office looked at the figures, they saw that Tony Edmondson only sat for 2 hours each month. So 24 hours a year was what he was doing, sitting as a Crown Court within this building. Well, the Ministry of Justice wanted to close it down. And the leader of the Northern Circuit asked me, as somebody who regularly appeared here, to write a report to the Ministry supporting that this court should remain open. Well, I can tell you that I wrote my report, I sent it to the Ministry, and within a matter of weeks it was closed. I hope that isn't an omen for today's proceeding.
You should have told us that earlier.
Fortunately, this report, which in its A4 format is 100 pages long, with 51 detailed recommendations, is not my report. Very little of what's contained in this report was written by me. In fact, looking at the detail now, it's been finished. Many of the sections which I did write have been placed in the bin, and persons with far more experience of the BMC and detailed knowledge of corporate and charity affairs have drafted far better sections, which of course I've been able to discuss and debate and approve of. It is, however, I think important, before we look at a few slides which will help you to understand this report, it's important for you to know and understand how it came into existence. Nick has quite rightly said that it was April of this year, on the day after the AGM, that I was asked to chair this review group. And since then, we have all worked unbelievably hard in order to prepare as detailed and as careful a document as we possibly could. What did we do in order to prepare the report? Well, to begin with, we collated all the various documents, and there are very many of those, which deal with the organisational structures of the BMC. We did our own research into the best practice in membership organisations and governing bodies. We looked at, well, I should say we took legal advice. We were given permission to spend, I'm afraid, a bit of your money on taking legal advice from a firm of solicitors who specialise in this area. And they have given us important legal advice in relation to the current Articles of Association and how they might be changed, and in relation to a number of other features in the report. They've had the opportunity to go through and vet many of the recommendations that we make, which are based on a legal context. But of course, the most important thing that we've done is listening to your view. John Roberts organised, with Rab and Fiona, the membership survey. Fiona and I went round and had a number of very important and stimulating and interesting meetings with various focus groups. And we have used that information, we've collated it all, we've put it into a massive schedule, and most of what is in the report is based on your views of this organisation, not ours, or not necessarily ours. In the latter stages of the preparation of this report, they were pretty hectic times. We were having meetings in London, meetings in Manchester, meetings by Skype in the evenings, and thousands of emails were exchanged. And effectively, the individual 51 recommendations were exchanged between us all, amended, altered, and so you will be able to see when you read the detail that this isn't a report prepared by one person, but it's very much a product of all the persons who worked on this committee and all the views which we took account of from the membership when we drafted our recommendations. I have an apology to make before we look at a few slides, and that is that you haven't really had any prior disclosure of what's contained in this report. And I've received a number of emails complaining about that, and I don't blame you to complain a little. But let me try and explain and deal with that. We've done this in a fairly short space of time. 100 pages of narrative dealing with the detail takes a long time to think about it and then to write. And the 51 recommendations take a lot of thought before they can be written down and supported by the narrative of the report. And I'm afraid we were still writing that document and making amendments to recommendations last week, only just in time to go to the printers. And that's really the main reason why you haven't had prior disclosure. But we as a committee, from this moment onwards, or at least from the end of today, we're going to move to listening mode, because there's going to be a phase 2 period of consultation which will begin from this afternoon and will run through to the 22nd of December. And during that period, we're going to have another short members' survey for feedback on our report and recommendations. And we're going to have a dialogue, to begin with by written form, we hope, with the various focus groups which we met earlier on in this process. And I know that John Roberts will deal with a timetable. There are various things we have to do between now and December. There are various things that we have to do from then on, leading up to the annual general meeting in April of next year. But let's have a look at some of these slides. It's sometimes quite a good way of presenting some of the detail. If we can go to one, John. You can see that this deals with the evolution of the British Mountaineering Council. In 1944, it was set up as a body run by volunteers to represent and speak on behalf of all climates in Britain. Unlike many of the mountaineering clubs at the time, membership was, and this is in quotation marks, open to all, regardless of race, religion or political party. In fact, I've taken those words from Geoffrey Winthrop Young. I think he was the then president of the Alpine Club, and he was a very important figure in setting up the original BMC. And those are his words, and they, I'm sure, strike a chord with all of us today. Looking at the history as the climbing and hill walking and mountaineering changed, so has the BMC, growing with the sport and adapting to new areas and challenges. As relationships with interest groups, government, sporting bodies and landowners changed, the BMC had to formalise its structure and take on paid staff. In 1993, it became a company limited by guarantee in order to make its structure more professional and to manage liability. I think I ought to pause for one moment at this stage to say that there were some amazing figures which came out of the members' survey. You will be able to see, it's quite a thick document, I think it's over 50 pages long, what the members said in that survey. And one of the things they said was that 75% of the members approved of and were satisfied with the way the BMC was being run. That's a very encouraging figure. It has done a lot of good things over the last 10 years. I know there have been criticisms and there are some problems, but we hope with this report and our recommendations we can deal with those criticisms and make the appropriate changes. I suppose I ought to read that last bit, it's important. Despite this, the organisation has tried to stay true to its roots and give members a strong voice through the mechanism of area and specialist groups, all contributing to a national council. Go to slide 2. It's been 12 years since the BMC last had a significant strategic review. Recent issues around the BMC's rebrand and challenging AGM have necessitated an independent review of the organisation. I know that there was talk about a review from an earlier period, but this group was only set up, as I understand it, following the AGM in April. Sport England, you all know who they are, have stated publicly that the BMC must change its governance to comply with its code of good governance and exposed a number of governance issues. Some members, and this is clear from not only the members' survey but also from the focus groups, have expressed concern about clarity of direction, strategy and policy, and that's been very much a part of our debate, our discussions, and it is dealt with very clearly and carefully in our recommendations, and you will see that as this afternoon unfolds. The third slide merely shows the group. I'm there as the chair. John Roberts, I'm not dealing with these persons in any specific order. John Roberts has really been a key figure in organising the committee, organising timetables. He's managed the operations very carefully as we have gone through the process. Rab and Fiona, we couldn't have done without their huge knowledge of how the current BMC operates. It's been hugely valuable to have their input when we've been dealing with the structures and the workings of the organisation of the British Mountaineering Council. Persons you won't know on that list, and in fact she's not here, Rebecca Ting. She's from Oxford. She's a very keen climber. I think she climbs E3. She's an expert in members' organisations, charity governance, and her work has been invaluable in relation to those areas that we've had to look at in relation to the report. Tim Strong, bottom right-hand corner, he's a corporate lawyer with a very fancy firm in London. We had a meeting there, and I've never been into premises like it, I can tell you. But he's a corporate lawyer, very experienced, and again, his input has been extremely important in dealing with some of the legal issues and the structure of this organisation. And finally, but not least, one of the persons, top left, Matthew Bradbury, you've already heard from today, dealing with Kendal Mountains. He's an independent director of the BMC. Simon McCalla is here. He's also an independent director of the BMC. And they are experts in their particular field of being involved in organisations that have both corporate functions and charity functions. And their expertise has been extremely valuable in assisting us to understand the problems and to come up with resolutions in the recommendations that we have written. Now I think John is going to deal with the members' survey here, so I'll hand over to John Roberts, because really he ran this side of the operation.
So it's incredibly important that we gather the views of the broad membership to find out, what they wanted to do and where they wanted the direction of the BMC to go, and to find out where the issues were. And we ran this independently with 2020 research. And we were overwhelmed, both within the ORG and within 2020 research, about the level of response and the diligence that people went into making those responses. They'd never seen anything like it in terms of the level and the detail that people went into the open questions, and it underpinned what we then went on to do to make sure that the recommendations fit that evidence. There have been a number of inquiries about statistical significance, and without wanting to go into it in too much detail, we're absolutely positive, along with 2020, that they are statistically valid, and we can have 95% confidence that the results of the whole of the BMC membership would lie within about 1.5% of the results that we gathered. So, this really underpins the rest of the report. I'm going to hand over to Fiona, who ran the focus groups, to go through what she did, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what members said to us, what focus groups said to us, and the legal advice.
Okay, so thanks if you did come to a focus group, because they were fundamental to our thinking, particularly when we were looking at how we could improve the internal workings of the BMC. What we did was take all the key stakeholders that actually either do work on behalf of the BMC or volunteers of the BMC, and I'm not going to go through the list because you can all read, but basically there were all the specialised committees. There were all the National Council, the Executive Committee. We sat down with Dave T, etc., etc., etc. And we used those to ask specific questions to get a really good feel of the board, so that we could collate the data into something that we could use alongside the membership survey.
As Ray mentioned earlier, we reviewed a number of codes of governance of other sports organisations and membership organisations, and also went to seek independent legal advice from a firm that was initially called Bond Dickinson, but rebranded halfway through to Womble Bond Dickinson, much to our amusement. They've given us some incredibly insightful advice that we're going to come on to later. But broadly, what members said about the BMC was that they really do highly respect what it's done. They respect its achievements, but they do feel that it needs to modernise and represent both their interests and the interests of all participants in climbing, hill walking and mountaineering. That was fundamental. That was very, very clear, and over 2/3 of respondents said that. In fact, it's over 70%. I don't know if everybody can see them. I didn't really want to read them out, but broadly, they also said that the BMC should represent the broad church of activities. They said that access and conservation was the highest priority, which will probably come as no surprises to anybody. They did consider it value for money. Interestingly, again, over 70% of people believed that the BMC should seek to increase both participation and its membership, but to do so conscientiously and with conservation in mind. Particularly, it said the BMC must improve transparency, communications and democracy with clarity on strategy and policy. And one of the really insightful things that we saw was we asked for what parts of the activities and climbing, hill walking and mountaineering members participated in. And actually 72% of members surveyed participated in indoor climbing. Pretty much all the members participated in 3 or 4 of those activities, being outdoor climbing, indoor climbing, hill walking and mountaineering, with hill walking being the only group with an isolated membership participation of about 11% who didn't participate in any of the other things other than hill walking. And so Fiona's going to go through a little bit about the focus groups now.
Okay, so I think one of the key things that came from the focus groups was the amount of energy for the BMC. There were a number of things that they were really asking for, particularly the volunteers and internal staff, was that we want clarity about where are we going, what's the direction, how do I decide which sort of things we should be getting involved with. And so we really got that message, it came strongly from all the focus groups, along with the fact that there was a real request for a balance between are we representative and are we governing. And most of the focus groups were absolutely behind the fact that we should do both. They just wanted clarity about how that was going to be done, and that we didn't take resources from one in order to do another. And that was across all the sports as well, so they weren't just saying we should be doing indoor sports climbing or hill walking or rock climbing. They wanted to see us across all of it. The other key things that came a bit of a surprise to us was the level of desire from our partners to work more closely with the BMC, and that the BMC should be their representative body in some form. I guess the other key thing that probably isn't a surprise to most of us is that a request for more technology, to engage with members more effectively through technology, so that they have an input and that it becomes a broader representation of the members' views. And the other key little bit was, actually, if as a member you have a grievance, how do you raise it? How do we actually make sure that members' voices get heard when something for them is going wrong? Alongside that, though, we also heard we need to enable the organisation to become a modern organisation and is able to run more effectively as an organisation.
It just shows you what you can do when you make a mess of a name change, doesn't it? I think if I was a partner, I mean, when we instructed them, they were called Bond Dickinson, well-respected national firm, and they've now joined forces with this outfit in America called Womble. But I think if I was a partner, I'd go and work somewhere else. I will read this out, and I could go into a lot of detail about the problems with the current Articles of Association. But I'll just give you a tiny little insight into the advice that we've got. This sentence here is the final sentence in the written advice from Bond Dickinson, where it says, in our view, the Memorandum and Articles of Association of the BMC as currently drafted do not reflect best practice, do not reflect good governance, create legal uncertainty and risk for the BMC and those involved in its governance. And she goes through in that report all the various individual articles, some of which conflict with each other if you compare them. At some stage in the articles it says that the executive has the legal powers of the company, and then in others it gives that power to the National Council. And she envisaged all sorts of horrendous things happening. If there was ever, for example, a fatal accident because bolts had come out of a quarry somewhere where the technical committee had played a part in placing and approving those bolts, the prosecuting authority, I'm going to forget the name of it now, the health and safety executive, I've defended in one of their prosecutions. They're very, very meticulous in the way they prosecute. And they would look at these articles and they would say, well, the people we're going to charge with corporate manslaughter aren't the directors. They're not responsible for this, but the members of National Council. So there are all sorts of problems that exist within the Memorandum and Articles of Association, and we advise that they be completely changed. Of course, you, the members, will have to approve of that, either in an EGM or at the AGM in April of next year. But that's a pretty key recommendation that we make. I was going to go through this particular slide about the various areas that we've looked at, but I don't think it's necessary. Time is running out. So I'm going to move on and ask John to deal with the next page, which are the key themes.
So Rebecca and Paul, who was originally on the team, and Tim went through what is good governance. And broadly, they come out as 7 key themes, which I'm not going to go through. But what we tried to do is ensure that the BMC's governance and the recommendations that we created mapped against these 7 key themes as well. And in order to find and to bring those recommendations to fruition, it was an incredibly laborious task, bringing together the 4,500 views of the members, all of the information, the 200 or so documents from the focus groups, all the codes of good governance and the independent legal advice, and bringing that together through an iterative cycle of research, peer review between the group, testing of opinions and themes, and actually we created for each of these 51 recommendations an individual report for each one, which goes into a significant amount of detail that ultimately forms what is actually 80 pages when it's designed up, and there are a couple of copies of that report. But ultimately we came out with 51 individual key recommendations that we've made. And we put them into 5 key areas and 5 key recommendation categories. There's headline recommendations, of which there are 5 recommendations in there, and I know you've got a one-pager in front of you. Now, these aren't the individual recommendations, they're sort of a key theme around each individual recommendation, or a binding of a few recommendations. Below the headline recommendations, we've got corporate structure, so recommendations about the BMC's legal status and its subsidiaries, for example, Mountain Heritage Trust, ACT, who you've heard from, and the Land and Property Management Trust. And then we've gone into 3 other categories below that. Governance, so how decisions are made, how people are held to account. Strategy and policy, actually what the BMC should do. And culture, leadership and management, fundamentally how it's run as a modern business. And so that brings us to the headline recommendations and to look at the the 5 key areas, the 5 individual recommendations that we start with. And Rab's going to, sorry, Rab. Ray's going to lead it.
Well, I will read these out, and then I think I'm going to hand over to Tim Strong at some stage to deal with the corporate structure. But I want to say something about the governance provisions, just to look at the organisational structure, just to make one important point. But I'll read these out, they're important. The BMC should ensure it is both the representative body for all climbers, hill walkers and mountaineers, and the governing body for competitive activities. On behalf of and in conjunction with its members, the BMC should 1. Create a vision for the sector that includes the relationship with clubs, partner organisations and stakeholders. 2. Create an organisational strategy to deliver this vision through its staff and volunteers. 3. Serve its members openly and transparently, developing strategies to engage members democratically in determining its future. And finally, to recognise the importance of indoor climbing as an activity in its own right. And I'm going to move, John, if I may, and then we can come back to Tim, just to look very briefly at some of the further recommendations that are bullet points. It wouldn't make sense for me to read all these out, and I'm just going to refer to some down the left-hand side. Do you have that document? It's on screen. If you can't read it, you can see the document. The first bullet point on governance is that the executive committee be disbanded and replaced by a board of directors chaired by an independent chair. We keep the nominations committee and finance and audit committee under the board of directors. The National Council be disbanded and replaced by a members' assembly chaired by the president. We also propose, having had important focus groups with the partners, that there should be a partners' assembly as part of the organisational structure of the BMC. We're going to review specialist committees and working groups, make operational changes to local areas to make them more representative, and implement online voting for AGMs. I won't read out the last 2, but I just want to go very briefly before coming back to Tim to the chart which you have, because there is quite I know this is quite a complex document, but there's an important point to be made here. You've got in the centre of the document at the top the board of directors with 11 positions, independent chair, 3 senior leadership team members, 3 independent directors, 3 members assembly members, and 1 partners assembly member. And then we look at the members assembly, 16 positions, and the chairs of the specialist committees. The president is the chair. What we have found, having listened to your views, is that it's absolutely key that the organisation has a vision and that it has a detailed, very, very detailed aims and mission statement for the next few years. It can be reviewed in 3 or 4 years' time, but you need to have a detailed vision and a detailed mission statement. And just to show that this isn't, we're not proposing a change with all the power at the top going downwards. It'll be the members, and this will be written very carefully into the new, if you approve, into the new Articles of Association. It's the members and the people who sit with the president on the members' assembly who will decide what that vision is. It's not for us to write a vision. It's for you, the members, to write your own vision, your own mission statement, and then that will be passed up. So the arrows on this diagram will go up from the bottom of the organisation to the directors for them to work out business plans and budgets and to pursue the strategy that you have set then. And if at any stage in the future they want to change course, they have to come back to the members' assembly. They have to come back to the members. And that will be made absolutely clear in the recommendations that we make and in the new Articles of Association. So I'm going to hand over to Tim to deal with the corporate structure.
Thanks, Ray. Just in case anyone's worried about what someone from a London fancy office has of relevance to this group, I'm just at home in a tent. So the corporate structure, you've got on one side, you'll see the recommended corporate structure, and on the other side, a summary of the recommendations. So just taking them very briefly, the first one is to remain a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee, not to change that. We spent a lot of time looking at it. The legal advice is that BMC would not currently achieve charitable status, which is reserved for bodies which are targeted at public benefit. And this body is mainly targeted at its membership and membership services. There are currently 3 charities operating. The BMC is the sole member of those 3 charities, and so they operate as charitable subsidiaries. They are not currently compliant with either company law or charities law, so some work needs to be done on improving that. And we've also recommended that there be some operational terms of reference agreed between the BMC and the charities to ensure that the vision and the organisational strategy that's decided by the members is then driven down into the subsidiaries as well. And then the third element of this is we've suggested that either subsidiaries, i.e. separate companies owned by the BMC, or subgroups within the existing organisation should be set up to focus on certain activities. And there are 3 broad areas. One is commercial operations. There's strong feedback from the members was that the BMC should continue trying to develop profitable commercial partnerships. And there are good reasons why potentially putting those into a separate subsidiary would make sense in terms of managing commercial and financial risk, for example. The second is that there might be a subsidiary or a subgroup that focuses on competitive activities, where that focus will allow better relationships with people like Team GB and other organisations involved in competitive activities. And finally, that we should consider a subgroup or a wholly owned subsidiary to support activities specifically in Wales. And the reason for that, in essence, is that may assist in gaining access to certain Welsh assembly funding and from other Welsh funding bodies, and also to better reflect the need to conduct certain activities using the Welsh language.
I don't think this is my...
Even though you've done most of it. Okay, so I think a lot of you would really like to know, so what's going to be different in terms of the committee structures? How do members get an input? How's it going to work perhaps in the future? So we've got this amazing diagram. You may not be able to see it up here, but you will have your own visuals. No, you probably can't. Well, I just thought it was because I need new glasses. So I think, as Ray's already said, I think the first and most important thing is to say that this diagram starts from the bottom, because we've tried to design this so that members stay at the heart of the organisation, which is very difficult. The size of organisation we're becoming and the range of sports and activities that we undertake. However, what we wanted to do was enable those members to still have a key role in deciding where the organisation goes and what the vision is. And so what you have is the Members' Assembly, who will be responsible for two key things. One is to make sure that they scrutinise the board, to make sure they're not doing things that the members wouldn't necessarily want them to be doing. And secondly, and more importantly, is helping to set the vision and the policies of the organisation, so that the board of directors can then get on with converting that into appropriate strategic plans and managing the internal runnings of the organisation. So the Members' Assembly, we've changed the composition of it to reflect that broader umbrella of participation in different activities. So what we've done is we've reduced the number of representatives from local areas. So at the moment you get 2 representatives coming from each area. What we're doing now is reducing that to 1, so that we can allow the specialist volunteers a voice in the Members' Assembly. Because what we feel is if we're looking at the vision and policies, we should have some people that are regularly, day in, day out, involved in volunteering in those areas. So we've placed those on there. Obviously we need we also felt that actually if we want a good broad brush of different types of members, we're also going to go directly to the membership and request people with specific skills, so they don't have to come via the local area, they can come direct onto the Members' Assembly. And also to make sure we've got a clear balance, we also want somebody from the Partners' Assembly. And again, Ray's mentioned the Partners' Assembly, and what we see here is a representative forum for partners to come together so that we can come up with sector-wide initiatives, so that we make sure that we are doing the best for the sector as opposed to just focusing on a particular area. And finally, the Members' Assembly will be headed up by a president, and the president will be separated from the board of directors so that they can stay the champions of the members. So there will be no need to have a conflict of interest between that and the internal runnings of the organisation. So that's the Members' Assembly. Alongside the Members' Assembly, we will have the Board of Directors. So the Board of Directors are the group that will actually be running the BMC. They are going to be legally responsible, and they will need, I think, Tim, do you want to just, because it's a legal term, isn't it? Describe the chair, will you?
So, yeah, so what we've proposed is that the board should have an independent chair, and that is a feature of all governance codes, is that the chair should not be someone who is otherwise affiliated with the activities of the organisation. And by doing so, that ensures a measure of objectivity is brought to the ultimate decision-making of the board of directors as the organ which is responsible for under company law legally for managing the organisation.
Thank you. So who should be on the board? So we have our independent chair, and we will continue to have our 3 independent directors. Alongside those, what we also would like to see is 3 senior leaders of the organisation. Now this is very different to before, and actually links to some other recommendations we have, in that we believe that the organisation is now ready to expand its senior leadership team so that it has 3 senior people to take the burden. If we're starting to say we need to be sector leaders, we need to look at representing all those different groups, how can we expect one person to really take the lead on that? Although the CEO is still the CEO, what we're suggesting is we have a senior leadership team, and that team should be on the board of directors because they need to work with the other board of directors to ensure that we get the appropriate strategic plan that will get translated into a business plan, which then will come down to the staff, the heads of department or management team, who will get KPIs, and then the staff will also have KPIs. So we have a whole set of recommendations around how that senior leadership team will work and how that should filter down to ensure that we have what the board of directors set out in their strategic plan. We also felt that it was important that if we are going to be the leader in the sector, we should actually have a representation on the board of directors from the Partners Assembly, taking into account that obviously that's got to be carefully done in terms of conflict of interests. Have I done everybody? Sorry? Patrons, yes. So yeah, no, I meant in boards of directors. Yeah. So also alongside the board of directors, to ensure that we have oversight, we'll have the nominations committee who will be selecting senior members of the organisation. You will have the 3 independent directors, you'll have the president on there, and you have the chair. So that there's some clarity and distance. And also on we'll have the finance and audit committee as well, sitting alongside watching. Another key role that we felt was really important to this organisation is its patrons. And it was felt that we perhaps should review how we use patrons in the organisation, and that we can build and use them more effectively to be ambassadors for the organisation, and that they have a key role in doing that for us. What have I missed out? Specialist committees. The final bit is the specialised committees, as we've said. One of the key things that was raised legally was that if they have delegated responsibilities for decision making, then they need to be directly reporting into the board of directors. And we're also very aware that the specialised committees have developed over years, sort of independently grown. And so what we felt was it was really important to do a review of all specialised committees and all working groups, and make sure that it's the right mix, they're reporting to the right people, and to see whether they still sit where they do, or whether they might actually be better placed within one of the trusts or directly to the board. So there's a whole piece of work we're suggesting on that front. Am I done? Clubs, oh yes, my bit. Yes. Yes. So what? I've had to put up with this, you know. So yes, for us also, one of the things that came out very strongly in both the focus groups and the survey was that clubs have a really important role to play. If we want to encourage growth in participation and membership of the BMC, and we want to use volunteers, then it's going to be really important that we support clubs in helping people move from the indoors to the outdoors. One of the big things that came through in the survey was number 3 was mountain heritage. And you know, they're the custodians of that. Many of the clubs are producing guidebooks for us. So we felt that it was really important to support clubs in doing and working towards that. And the only final things was on the local areas, is that we thought they were fundamental to the democracy of the organisation, alongside some of the digital recommendations. But we did feel that there's a lot of work that can be done to support local areas to get more people there, more engagement, and so we've got a whole set of recommendations on offer around that one too. So you can have a nice lot of bedtime reading. Finally!
I think I've got the graveyard shift. There are still some people left in the room. Hey! Right, okay, so we've done all our talking and all our discussing, and that was very, interesting and important. And we've come up, as has already been said, to 51 recommendations. And it is, to read the 51 recommendations on their own is a bit bland and a bit bleak. You need to read the full report, so plenty of bedtime reading there. The bedtime reading will be online from about now, I think, on the BMC site. So, once you've read that, where and how can you participate? And that is by your input back into this, this process. Because by us producing this report of 51 recommendations isn't the final step. We now need your input to decide whether the recommendations fit in with your thoughts or not. And so, to ensure that, there will be an independent BMC member consultation. And that is going to be carried out independently by this company 2020 who produced the members survey. So that's going to go online on the next Wednesday, I think it is, whatever date that is, and that will run through. You can add your recommendations until the 22nd of December. That will be the cut-off point, and at that point, 2020 will analyse the results and pass it back to us. Apart from that, as we said earlier, we had a lot of input from the focus groups. We will be getting back in touch with the focus groups. We'll have given them time to read the report, to assimilate it, to drag it into their souls, and from that, let's hear what they want to report back to us. And once that is done, all the stakeholders will have a chance to comment on the report. And all that will go back into that will go back into more work for us team. So in November there will be local area meetings. At every local area in the next week or so, there will be, I think, at least 2 members of ORG are going to be at that meeting, being able to take your questions and answer them as best they can. That doesn't mean to say they can't answer the online survey. Then on the 2nd of December, there will be the National Council meeting where they'll be able to discuss it further. The National Council will discuss it further, and they will receive at that point, they'll go into the mix. There'll be the kind of information, the feedback from 2020 that we have at that date will be fed back to them, but also the National Council's own thoughts on the report. Then, as I said, the 22nd of December, survey and initial consultation closes. In January, I think we receive our full report from 2020 on the 5th of January, and this gives us a few days, maybe, John, to 10 days to be, wow, what a luxury we have. 10 days to work out how that matches up with the recommendations we've already put in place. Is that guy all right at the back? His heart doesn't sound very good. But that will allow us to factor in. Now, what you've got to bear in mind with all these recommendations, that a lot of them, one of them depends on the other. However, it is a single package that we are offering you. But there is possibilities within that to have some little twists and tweaks within it. Just to, so that we know that, we're listening to what you're saying. The consultation papers will be available for scrutiny on the BMC website after that date. And then, what happens after that? 17th of February, there will be National Council meeting where there's going to be, probably by then, there'll be a review of the Articles of Association. I think the memorandum's dropped out at this stage, hasn't it? We've moved on a bit. Was it 1873 that it dropped out? Oh, sorry. Hush my mouth. Anyway, so the National Council will be looking at that on the 17th of February, and then going up to the AGM. How that works, all depends on how the BMC want to play it or what wants to be done. But whether there is a single unit where AGM where everything changes, everybody stands down and everybody starts again, or whether there's two separate, an EGM and an AGM, that's not up to me to decide, I'm glad to say. I think I might go on holiday then. But anyway, so that's basically it. Now, as I say, yes, we can take questions at the moment, but the trouble is, you don't know very much about the report. There's not very much in that two-pager. Yes, we've given you outlines of it. The detail is in the 80-page report, which, as I say, will be online. It makes brilliant, bedtime reading. You'll be asleep before you know it. But anyway, it is. Speaking as a climber and everything, I think it's a bloody good report. So, thank you.
I think I'm going to take the strong judge's line and say we simply haven't got time for any questions and ask council to sit down. We're going into listening mode now. We've done all the work. We want you to really take on board the complexities of this report, digest it, and then we will listen to everything that you have to say. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I know some of us are going for a drink. If you want to chat informally about this, we're here and we will help.
Where are we going for a drink?
Ladies and
It's all
gentlemen,
very well say we're going for a drink.
Rab's buying, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. The guys are around now if you want to talk to them in the margins. What I would like to say on behalf of the BMC, a very, very big thank you to all the team for what has been a fantastic amount of effort in a very short time. So guys, on behalf of everyone here in the membership, thank you very much.